Hello. Today I'm continuing my jobs for autumn in the garden in preparation for winter, and today I'm going to cut back the autumn fruiting raspberries. These have all finished, or almost all finished now. There are two different types of raspberries, summer fruiting and autumn fruiting. Summer fruiting you treat slightly differently to this. The joy of autumn fruiting raspberries is you don't have to worry too much about them. You just cut them right down to the ground at this time of year. Any time between late October and November and end of February, and that will encourage them to send up lots of new growth next year and produce lots of raspberries. I put all the raspberry canes that I've cut down into the compost heap to add not only green but some brown material to it as well. It's going to take me a little while to clear these, but it doesn't take too long and it's quite a satisfying job. But when it's chilly, there are moments when I wish you could just wave your hand and it would all be done. Having cut all of this back, I can now see just how overrun this bed is. It's got some strawberries in it. Well, that's fine, I can lift those. But it's got an awful lot of couch grass in it, which I think is called twitch grass elsewhere. And this is not going to come out without me really going through the soil and lifting every last piece of root. That's going to be a really hard job. So I think this year what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift all of these raspberries and wash all the soil off their roots and really carefully pull away any weed roots, and then replant these somewhere else, which will mean that when this bed is clear, I'll be able to use this for growing something else next year, and hopefully it then won't be riddled with pernicious weeds. We've been forecast our first frost tonight, so I think I need to gather in the last of the runner beans. This is a variety called White Lady, and I'll leave a link for this in the video description. It's got a really pretty creamy white flower with a hint of yellow to it. The beans inside the pods are white and very lovely, and we use them in soups and stews, and they're really our alternative to potato throughout the winter. You can see how easy these are to pick, and that's because the canes that support them actually lean out over the pathway, so that as the beans grow, they're growing hanging down really accessibly. And I made a video or two about how Mr. J and I built this structure. It's very simple, very straightforward, and very effective. When I get into the kitchen, I will take these all out of their pods, and thank you, ducks. I'll take these all out of their pods, and the ones that are in very dry pods like this, I will save for seeds for next year, and the ones that are in green pods, I will blanch and pop into the freezer, and some of them, if I have the energy in the next day also, I will then can. I've been growing these beans as perennials, so each year I just cut the plants off at about 4 to 6 inches above the soil level, take away the top growth, pop it on the compost heap, or put it down on the ground and let it rot down in situ and just return all those nutrients to the soil. And I thought this year I would do a bit of an experiment, and I thought I would leave the plants as they are right through till next year. And I'm expecting all the leaves to die back and just to be left with the stems that twine around the bamboo canes. But I thought it would be interesting to see whether the new shoots only come up from underground, or whether the stems might, and I don't know, it would be an absolute experiment, whether they might send out new shoots next year, which would be potentially even more vigorous. So watch this space. We'll come back next year and have a look to see how they've got on. One of the things that I've realised is that I had mislabelled my seed beans, and I've planted what is very definitely some Greek gigantes. Now it's still a type of runner bean and that's fine, and the other ones are usually so close that there is the potential for cross-pollination. But these ones are very definitely Greek gigantes beans. I can just tell by the size of the pods, but in this case not by the size of the bean because they hadn't fully developed yet. Anyway, some of these are without a doubt Greek gigantes beans rather than white ladies. This year, as I harvested the squash, I brought them in under here, which is a covered area, but it is open to the elements. They just weren't going to get wet. It allowed air to circulate around them without them getting too damp. And they've now got nice firm skins, and so will be really good for storing. Things like the spaghetti squash, this hasn't quite ripened enough or cured enough yet, so I'll pop this into the kitchen to carry on curing. But the ones that are the darker deep yellow look to me like they are pretty much cured now, and the way to know whether they're ready for storing in a spare room or in a cool shed is if you can put your thumbnail against the skin and it doesn't make a dent in the skin, then it's ready. So we've got a whole load of squashes here that will be able to be stored, and we store them in our spare bedroom, which is kept above freezing, but it's actually a very cool room. And in the current health crisis, we know we're not going to be having anyone to come and stay, so that can become my squash storeroom. But the frost is coming tonight, so by tomorrow morning there will be a frost, and these will get damaged by the frost, so it's really important that we get these into the house today. Mr. J has very kindly said that he will come and give me a hand carrying these over to the house, but I'm going to load a few into a basket for ease of carrying. Especially the smaller ones. So these are very small butternut squash, and do you know, I'm quite pleased in some ways that they are reasonably small, because they're now about the right size for 1 to 2 people. Mr. J is not as keen on squashes as I am, so 1.5 person portion is perfect, really. So that basket is now ready to carry through. So what I'm going to use to store the squash in the spare room is these kind of half-size crates. These are the ones that we use for the veg boxes, and veg boxes aren't happening over the winter, so I can use them to store our squash in. And they will take a couple of squashes quite neatly without them touching, and they will store quite nicely. That will allow the air to circulate around them. If one does go off, it's not touching the one next to it to pass the mould across. And the great bit is that I can stack these 5 or 6 baskets high in our spare room, so they don't take up too much floor space. And then in the top one I will put one of the larger squashes that stands out above the height of the basket, because I don't want to damage the squash by putting another basket on top of it. So the larger squashes will go in there, and they will also just sit on the floor in the spare room too. So let's get these moved.